Makuam, greetings. I'm Representative Derrick Lente. I represent the 65th District in the New Mexico House of Representatives. In the 2019 legislative session in the state of New Mexico, Representative Andrea Romero from Santa Fe and I created and pushed and introduced a piece of legislation titled Replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. That garnered a lot of attention from a lot of different people in a lot of different places, not only just in New Mexico, not only just in our country, but around the world. And unbeknownst to us, the debates that would happen, the talks that would happen, and the people that we would have to talk to in regards to why we wanted to do this, why it was valid to do this, why in the world we would even think about doing this, was all put on our plate. And when we would answer those questions about the who, the what's, the whys, it was incumbent upon us that we understood that it was the right thing to do. So Indigenous Peoples Day in 2019 was put in progress. It passed through the House with bipartisan support. It went to the Senate and finally landed on our governor's desk, Michelle Lujan Grisham, signed into law in April of 2019. And in October of 2019, we celebrated our inaugural Indigenous Peoples Day here in the state of New Mexico. And it's from the courage of those legislators, of those harsh discussions that we had, those emotional discussions that we had in regards to if they were for it or if they were against it, that we were able to create and bring to light and bring to reality a day like today, so that you can celebrate along with you and yours and your community, just as I'm going to celebrate with my family and my community. But when I think about those discussions that were had back in 2019, the values that were important to me were those shared values, those learned values that I learned from my grandparents back in my pueblos, at Isleta Pueblo and at Sandia Pueblo. The values from my grandpa, my grandma, my father, my mother, that made me understand that if we are going to create this emotional topic and discuss it in a public dialogue and a public discourse, that we are going to do so in a very respectful manner. That it's not about being right or being wrong. It's about being considerate and knowing that in New Mexico, that lays home to 23 pueblos, nations, and tribes, it again was the right thing to do. And so when we had those discussions, it was always important for me to approach the topic knowing that not everyone is going to see the same way that I saw the idea. Not everyone was going to appreciate it. Not everyone was wanting to support it. And in some cases, many people were against it. And for every one of those individuals that we approached them with respect. We understood their concerns. But at the end of the day was created. And at this very place, the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, back in October of 2019, we had our inaugural Indigenous Peoples Day celebration. And it's from that celebration that makes me reflect also that during our discussions in the legislature, where we were having those debates, that I was not only debating for the indigenous peoples within the state of New Mexico or in this country, but the people I was debating on behalf of were also those indigenous peoples around the world. That once the day we celebrated in October of 2019 had come and gone, the number of phone calls, the number of emails, the number of mails that I received from people around the world, indigenous, that I identified as indigenous or that supported the idea of having an Indigenous Peoples Day created, were abundant. And from that reflection, I understood that not only just in New Mexico do indigenous peoples have their own trials and tribulations, their own struggles, but that throughout the world, that whether you're fighting for your rainforest, whether you're fighting against the exploration of your lands, whether you're fighting for your clean water, your clean air, whether you're fighting to preserve your language, or you're fighting to retain your identity, your culture, and your religion in your respective indigenous community, that this day was for all of us. And it's not just one day, but it's every single day of our calendar year. That we understand that we are indigenous and we are proud to be indigenous. That there is no one else like us in this world. That when you look up the word indigenous, it means to be native. And to be native is to be from the place that you were born and that your ancestors left you a legacy to fulfill. And that a day like today is one that our ancestors always dreamt of, that we are their answers to their prayers. And that when they fought for us, they bled for us, they cried for us, and in some cases they paid the ultimate price of dying for us, that they could see a day like today so that we could enjoy, so that we could celebrate, and that we know that we can leave it to our children and to those yet to come. That we understand that Indigenous Peoples Day is not a reflection and is not a bash on a person, that it's more of a celebration, of an education, of an awakening of who we are as a people, as a society, and as a community. Knowing that being Indigenous is who we are. It's inherent to us, and it's who we were born as an identity to, and it's who we will die with an identity with. So being Indigenous on Indigenous Peoples Day should be a reflection of who you are and how you feel and what you bring and your contribution to your own community. Now, today we celebrate in 2020 in much more different circumstances than in 2019. In 2019, the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center Plaza was filled with thousands of people from 23 Pueblos, nations, and tribes, from Albuquerque, native, non-native alike, celebrating who we were or who we are as a people. Now, COVID has turned our world upside down. And I appreciate that all of you tuned in today to join us, to celebrate with us in your own respective way. And that I encourage all of you to still fight the fight, protect yourselves, protect your communities, and protect your families. Because being Indigenous also means that we have a legacy to fulfill, that we are not to be extinguished, and we have not been extinguished by many attempts by other foreign people and places. That this very virus will not either extinguish us, that we are to be safe, that we will see each other on the other side when a vaccine is found, and that we will once again celebrate face to face and break bread around a table. Because that's, if anyone else knows, what Indigenous peoples do best, is that we feast. And as we feast, I look forward to once again being able to feast with all of you, and I look forward to being able to celebrate with all of you, and I wish all of you a happy Indigenous Peoples Day, that we understand that it's not one day that we're Indigenous, it's every single day of the year that we share our Indigenous identity. So thank you and take care.